So, welcome back to the PERRINN 4 podcast once again, where we explore the stories, the people, and the technology shaping the future of motorsports. I'm your host, Gaurang, and today we are diving into the journey of someone who embodies the spirit of curiosity and innovation, Yohann, our young engineer whose passion for technology has taken him from tinkering at home to designing scale models and managing major exhibitions. Of course, joining us as always, the driving force of PERRINN 4, Nico Perrin. Nico, great to have you back again. How's it going?
Hi, yeah, great. Glad to see the podcast with a new episode today.
Yes, and Johan, it's your first experience on our podcast, so a very special welcome to you. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great, ready to get started and chat.
Great. So let's start at the beginning. So when we last spoke, you specifically mentioned that it's more about the tech than the racing when I asked you about the PERRINN 4. So take us back, and I just wanted to know, and the audience would want to know, what first sparked your fascination with how things work in the world of motorsports and engineering?
So for me, the phrase "it's more about the tech than the racing" sort of sums up my journey to eventually becoming an engineer. I've sort of been curious how things work, and sort of as a child, rather than watching necessarily motorsport or just general TV or races or sports, I was sort of captivated by a show like How It's Made or any sort of episode on Discovery Channel. Sort of fascinated by the mechanics of objects, how things are made, how things are taken apart, how they're put together, and sort of what makes them tick. Now, sort of during my childhood, taking things apart wasn't always necessarily feasible. Stuff was expensive, didn't exactly have a garage full of parts, sort of lying around. So I was sort of introduced into CAD, at school. And to me, that was sort of the opportunity I got to play with models, designs, take things apart all within the 3D digital space without the sort of need for physical components. And I sort of distinctly remember watching an episode of sort of How It's Made. It was about high performance engines. And although sort of an ambitious goal, it was, I wanted to model one, and I sort of wanted to make it animate and move on my screen. And I remember after school, I'd sort of spent hours making this model. And to be honest, looking back at it now, it was one of the clunkiest, probably worst CAD that I've ever done. But when I sort of finally got it to move and animate on my screen, at that time, it was sort of the coolest thing in the world to me.
So which model was it? Was it a specific car that inspired you, or was it like maybe just not a car? Is it like a rocket or something?
At the time, it wasn't necessarily a specific car. I saw them building a V8 engine.
The engine.
That sort of, just having it rotate, spin on the screen was, what I wanted to do. And that sort of solidified my sort of love for engineering, because it wasn't necessarily about, how the car that was put in and how fast it went, or whether it would win races. It was more understanding and, how the systems were created, how it was built in the first place. So that sort of, laid a very strong foundation to the
foundation. Yes, that's right. Very interesting. Well, that's such a modern origin story. The interesting bit is how learning to build was a digital first approach than the physical first. Obviously, because it wasn't unfeasible and there were so many aspects to it. So, Nico, when you hear that, does it remind you of your own beginnings? And I'm assuming it must be vastly different of how you approached it and what inspired you.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's nice to hear Johann's story. Actually, I didn't know all the details, but I did a bit of teaching at university, how to design a race car, and I always said to the that's in the past 2, 3, 4 years, and I always say to the students, focus on the digital space, because you can do so much in the digital space. You can do things that you wish you would do in the physical space, but you don't have potentially the money or the time to do certain things. But in the digital space, you can replicate more or less everything, accurately, and learn so much. And it's nice to know that Yohann took that approach, because I think that's what makes you actually a better engineer at this time where everything's becoming more and more digital. So really interesting to hear that, and I guess that makes sense as well in relation to Yohann joining the team and contributing to the 4 to 4 project. So yeah, nice to hear.
Yes, yes. So, Johan, how did you, first, discover the team, Parent 424, and what attracted you about the project?
So I actually came across Perrin 424 actually completely by accident, by chance. I was sort of scrolling through LinkedIn on my bed one day, and I remember seeing a video posted by PTC Onshape of Nico. He was sitting in a chair in an office somewhere, sort of talking about the project, sort of why you were doing it, very briefly going into sort of what it entailed. And, initially I sort of didn't really think of much, but as I sort of continued to listen into the video and I started doing a little bit of digging around, I sort of found the whole PERRINN initiative. And, at that time I was like, there's something interesting, and, I'll look a little bit more into it. And at that time, I'd sort of just finished my master's. I was struggling to find that sort of first elusive, break into the industry, regardless of whether it was motorsport or just sort of general engineering. And I knew I had the motivation, the attitude, and a sort of portfolio of projects at that time. But, I didn't have the right sort of experience. And that sort of, to me, felt like it was a little bit of a hindrance, and I sort of kept on getting those rejections. But I thought in my head, maybe PERRINN might actually be the way to go. It might be the perfect opportunity to get that, experience. And initially it was, invest a little and you get all the information, which for most of motorsport, that's, unheard of entirely. No one ever gives you all the details, all the data, access to absolutely everything. Yeah. And, to me, that was a gold mine. So much I could just learn from just looking, playing around, seeing the models on Onshape or seeing the Google spreadsheets and looking at the data. Right. And, initially, I thought, why not? Let's just join a meeting, see what it's like. And I think for a while, I never really did anything. I sort of just listened, absorbed. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Nico, but, you realize I kept on coming. I kept on trying to contribute where I could. And eventually you sort of said, hey, there's a project, do you want to do it? Do you want to commit to it? So I was like, obviously, sure. And that was sort of a terrifying, sort of experience.
Yeah.
And, in the end,
it really worked.
To me, in the end, it sort of really explained what I remember watching in that video. It wasn't just about sort of the project, but it was more about the trust and the creativity, the open source mindset, which sort of pulled me in. And, to this day, I'm still getting involved and contributing where I can.
Yeah. I'll chip in now, but I love hearing that, Yohann, because this is the perfect example of a great success story of how to contribute to this project. And I had so many people coming to me like Yohann, initially saying, I'm interested in this. How can I contribute? And I always say, I don't know yet. I need to get to know you first. Stick around. If you stick around, then little by little we're gonna 424 is such a complex project to develop. Requires experience, or requires attention to detail. It's already very optimized. So to contribute to a project like this, I need to be able to match the skill set of somebody with what is required to make sure we add value to the project. Okay. The last thing we want to do is try and do something and not going anywhere. So Johann's been great at sticking around, as he said, and coming to the meetings that are open to everyone. At a click of a button, you can just attend our weekly meetings, and it's a great example of being patient and getting to know the team and the other team members, for example, which in itself is fun enough, to that is already fun, I think, to just be part of the community. But to contribute, yeah, required a little bit more time to understand, to match that, that the need to do something with the skill set of Yohann, and that came. We're going to talk about it, but we did a few really really valuable things for the team
Yeah.
together, and it's been a great story. So I'm glad it worked.
Great. Yeah, yeah. I think you sort of answered my next question, Nico, which was about why is open collaboration, the open source, so central to Parent Protocol's philosophy? And you just answered that. But my sub question to that was, how can young engineers get involved in our community, and what can they gain from it? Should they reach out to you? Should they be enrolled within the PRN and a community? And how would they do it? And what would they gain from it?
Yeah. And open source development is not easy. I think there is a misconception sometimes that you put a project open source and naturally the crowd will come and develop that project for you. At the end of the day, no open source project happens this way. Even the famous software open source projects actually rely on a very small core team, always. And then the crowd can gather around, either learn from it, or in software it's a bit easier. You can fix bugs and things like that. That is accessible by most people, but the core development is hard. The core development of any high level product is really hard. You can't just turn up, spend a day, and think that you're going to add value like that. It's hard. So the best way, as I always say, is first of all, PERRINN is a team open to anyone, and you can come and observe and spend some time with us. And PERRINN.com is the first point of call. It's active every day on a daily basis. Every team member, I'm very active on it, and other team members who are doing contributions are posting all activities on it. So there is activity there every day. It's the first place for anybody who interested to go and have a look. You don't even need an account. You can just go on PERRINN.com and see the activity without even logging in. And then if you want to do more, you can register to send us messages as well, so we can have a discussion there, a bit like on WhatsApp, but more open if you like. And then you can take it to the next level and attend one of our meetings that we have weekly on Wednesdays at the moment, and start having a discussion. It always starts with a chat and a discussion and getting to know each other. So all the people who have contributed, like Yohann, in a positive way, have started this way. They sticked around, and so it doesn't work for everyone, but you can learn something in any case. And yeah, for me, I have to be really efficient with the energy that we spend. Every new contributor means also an investment from my side and from the core team to integrate that person. So it's for it to win on both sides. It takes a bit of time, and making sure again it's the right contribution that is done by that person. Yeah.
Well, you said it beautifully. I hope there is no more explanation required for our audience who is watching. And if this entices you, the project that is going on, it's not a secret. And you can just go to PERRINN.com and everything is out there. All the information, who's involved. And yes, I hope to see some new faces after this. Great. So Yohann, you had mentioned uploading your early CAD models to GrabCAD, right? And even teaching yourself like Python. So did you always see yourself as an engineer, and how was that journey of learning new tools? Or was it more about just following your curiosity?
So for me, I think it definitely was more of following curiosity than sort of setting out to be an engineer from the start. Like sort of most young people, you're finding your feet, not necessarily knowing what you wanted to do. But for me, I think I was more like it's 80-90% of the way there. I knew I loved mechanics, things, parts, manufacturing, and that sort of fascination by problem solving or creating new things, from scratch to fix something. Yeah. And it sort of wasn't till, later in my sort of education and thinking about university, what do I want to do? Who do I want to be? So and that eventually engineering was naturally the sort of perfect answer, and uploading to GrabCAD was sort of just a place to start building a portfolio, something to make me stand out, show off my skills, and sort of give me an edge. And initially, that sort of uploading wasn't necessarily targeting a project per se, but for example, I wanted to learn surface design. So, let's think of something, whether it be, creating a light bulb, for example, or learning how to surface design an aerofoil. So that sort of taught me areas of that, making a parametric gear set to design a transmission. That sort of taught me how to use the parametric functionality of most CAD softwares. Or sometimes it was just, this is really cool. I want to show off. So in a way. And similarly with sort of Python, at the time, it was more of just, who knows, I may never end up using it, but it was sort of a potential door opening rather than a requirement. And, with AI being the latest and booming with that sort of technology, I sort of went down and sort of focused a little bit on that, trying to get understanding and get the nice fundamentals. So doing computer vision and, tracking my phone, stuff I did at university for my Formula student. I, developed AI algorithms for an autonomous racing car, stuff I never thought I would be ever doing during my, when I was younger.
That's the
But,
best part.
In my head at that time, before knowing all of this, it was like, I think this is a good skill to have. It may be useful in the future. So for me, it was, a curiosity-driven sort of learning process rather than just following a set engineering path. And I think the engineering naturally became the byproduct of that. And looking back at it now, I actually think that I was doing exactly what an engineer was doing without realizing it. I was problem solving, creating, sort of iterating long before I ever studied it or decided I wanted to be an engineer.
Yes, that's lovely. I like it. I like the approach. The curious approach is always kind of fascinating because you usually bog down yourself when there are hurdles and challenges where you have to learn tools, you have to do a lot of research. You might like some tools, you might not like some, and then just moving on and just trying to push yourself. So what was, let's say, the best highlight where you were trying to show off, right? What was that model? Maybe if you can share about it and just talk through what inspired that model and so on.
So for me, I think the main model was designing a transmission. I actually initially started off with a simple question: was cars have a transmission? They, use a bunch of gear ratios.
Yes.
First of all, where these gear ratios come from, because they have to be calculated somehow. And then from that, how do you take a bunch of gear ratios and actually turn it into a functional set of gears? So in GrabCAD has a lovely forum feature where you can just sort of ask questions. So I sort of posed that question and I had a bunch of people come respond, and I actually had a genuine conversation. Someone was willing to spend the time, answer questions, and I sort of worked through an example I found in a book and initially calculated those ratios, and is where the programming came in. I built a script. I built a script to take those parameters and produce that ratio. And then from that ratio, I built another script to, okay, how do you convert those ratios into a set of gears? And then that sort of led where the CAD design element came in. I parametrically built a gear model. And then from that, I built all the gears. And then from that, and then I built the transmission. So it started all right from an initial question, not because anyone forced me, because it was just a general curiosity.
Yeah.
I see it every single day. I sit in a car every single day. How on earth do these gear ratios, ever get calculated, to now having a model where just a couple of tweaks somewhere very high up the chain, and now I have a brand new assembly that should mathematically do exactly what I expect it to do. So for me, that's sort of a project right from start, right to the end. And I would have loved to be able to, produce it hold the gears in my hand and
Yes.
have the whole thing run. So having this sort of digital space, mixture of Python, mixture of CAD, all helped me solve that question. And I have a pretty good understanding of that sort of process and concept.
Really inspiring, really inspiring. So, Nico, what was your maybe let's say the first, like the digital model or the physical model that you had to do, and just briefly, if you could mention the story about it.
Okay. Putting me on the spot here. Actually, I know. I I used to race go kart when I was younger. I said that before. And
Yes.
to be honest, it comes back to 424 because the obsession is just always the same for me. It's how fast can you go around the racetrack, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but when I left uni, I had time on my hands because I was waiting for a job in F1 if I could, and that was a time where things were difficult from a job's perspective. So I had weeks in front of me. So I went back to live with my parents, and uh, I thought, okay, I'm gonna build a software that can predict the lap time of a go kart, but I wanted it to be very graphic and nice to use from a user perspective. So I started designing a complete go kart. I had one actually in my garage because I was still sort of racing a little bit. So I just went and tape measure everything and just loved the process of replicating on the computer the 3D shape of the go kart. Not only
Yeah.
the chassis but the steering wheel, and try and get all the details right, and then get the kinematic and the steering also to work, so you could see the wheels sort of turning left and right in the correct way in the software, and on top of that building all the dynamics that would take the go-kart around the racetrack. So I did all of that thinking
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'll turn it into a business, and it never happened. So it's sort of it stayed in my computer somewhere, but I spent the best part of every day for weeks doing that. And that, a bit like Johann's story, when you're obsessed and you want to get to the end of something. And I think, and I did, and I was really proud, and I even went to present the software to some company in go kart just to see if I could sell it. And again, it didn't happen, but um, it's a lot of what I learned actually I still use today for 424, which is interesting.
Really
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you could argue in a sense that it may not have never become a business or selling it, but you're sort of slightly bigger go kart, but it's essentially the
424
same thing.
is a big go kart at the end. There's no gear like a go kart, which is fantastic. But yeah, it's the fastest go kart on earth. Um, but yeah, you're right, and it's interesting, like the learning on such projects that you do on your own can really be translated into your
Mhm.
during your career later on. Scripting, coding, designing, all of these skills are so valuable. When you're an engineer. So yeah, similar story in a way, but that's how it started a bit for me.
Yeah, beautiful. It's good to hear all these stories, especially because engineering is really fascinating to me, and I've always delved myself into marketing, branding, but I'm also really close to engineering, how things work, all the mechanics behind it, as Johann mentioned, and it all began with race cars. So here we are. One part is of understanding the brand storytelling of how Parent 424 is going to be, and on the other end, of course, it's the car itself, which is going on, right? The building. So Johann, so tell us about that 13.5% scale model that you had mentioned, that you had taken to the Autosport International Exhibition that you had organized, right? So that was a big leap from just the virtual CAD to the real world logistics. So yeah, just briefly, if you could share the story.
Yeah, for me, that was sort of a very large project that was sort of, as I said earlier, very intimidating and terrifying thing to start off with, but it was sort of the most rewarding experience I had sort of till then. As I mentioned, it having little to no experience and then suddenly being able to say, I managed to do that is sort of the impressive thing. And to me, I'm still pretty proud and will always sort of remember that as the first big project that I sort of took on. But unlike a lot of my sort of portfolio projects, this was sort of, again, right from the start of concept design all the way to finally I could hold it in my hands, which motivated me, I think, probably the most out of it. And I sort of remember that when I sort of got the chance to take it and own it, you know, initially I thought that Nico would be constantly over my shoulder, constantly prodding me, asking me, what are you doing? What's your plan for this? Because, in my head, who would trust someone with, no experience like this? But, you trusted me, you gave me full autonomy. And in the end, I was able to take full control. I remember I spent hours after each meeting tweaking, each part of the model, making it 3D printed, making it sort of impactful, optimizing that geometry, sort of researching printer tolerances, what sort of the thinnest feature I could do, the thickest feature I could do, and most importantly, keep it within a reasonable budget at the time, which, if you remember, we never even knew at the time. We were sort of roughly estimating how much it would actually cost.
Well, we were trying to we are trying to build this 13.5% scale model of 4:4, and effectively we, budget wise we had some, but not a lot. And we actually, Yohann, if you remember, we contacted quite a few companies to get quotes, and traditional companies doing scale model, they will charge a lot of money, and because they have experience and they do it for you, but we couldn't afford that, so we had to go the more like do it ourselves way, and 3D printing with a company that we found near Birmingham that helped us a lot as well. Yeah,
I still remember the once we got all the quotes, the price range from 500 to I think nearly 14,000 pounds just to build that tiny car. So we got a huge range of
and then we wanted to spend
quotes.
and I think we wanted to spend maybe a couple of £1,000 max. So you have to find that's I love that actually. We had to find solutions. You end up not having an unlimited budget. That's what I face every day with 4:4, trying to do difficult things but with limited resources. But that really pushes you to think out of the box constantly, and I really love that, because the easy thing would be to, well, if you have the money, to go to the company who knows how to do it, and they deliver it not really understanding how it's been made. But when I've found that a lot in my life, you always find ways to do it for cheaper if you really need to. But it requires you to get to the bottom of how things is made. You have to do it yourself a bit more than if you just ask someone to do it for you. You have to do it yourself. At the end of the day, there's no other way. But with Yohann, it worked really well. I'm glad you're saying that I was not over your shoulders too much, because I always feel like I tend to, I like checking things. I like to know what's happening. But I'm glad it worked for you, feeling like you had freedom. But I at the same time, I knew that you were really you paid attention to detail, which matters a lot. So it worked really well. Yeah.
And sort of off that, I again, story was, do you remember when we planned on going to Autosport?
Yeah.
That year, you had reached out. You had mentioned that let's go, let's do this show, let's bring the car. And I remember that they never really got back to you. You sort of sent a few emails here and there, and nothing got, of spur of the moment.
Yeah.
I called, and somehow I got the ball rolling. It just happened that was.
Yeah. So there was two things to do. So the model was one thing which took a few weeks, 3-4 months to do, because again, you're trying to find solutions and you're checking a lot of things. And then going to the show, which is in January, and it's a 4-day show, and you want to present yourself as well as you can. And there's a lot of logistics going with it, and we had to design because everything is about design for PERRINN, and we want it to be our design, which we don't want to turn up and and find that the chairs or the wall color is not what you like.
Mhm.
So ended up designing the stand, but then how are we going to actually produce that stand? How are we going to make the wall black with 424 on it? And had to find solutions for that again. And Yohann was great, just looking around and coming up with quotes. And I was pushing hard on making the cost as low as we could, yet having that sort of quality that we wanted. Just doing the walls in matte black was a challenge. Ended up finding this the vinyl that we would stick ourselves on the walls when we arrived the day before the show, and it was and I love these moments where we can make it happen ourselves, right? That's exactly the value of the team as well. You know, we come together and we make it happen. But it needs to look good as well, and I think the show was a success. You were at the show to support it, Yohann, in a really good way, and with the model car. So yeah, it's a great experience. I'm glad we went.
I'm definitely 100% glad we went, and as you rightly said, it sort of falls back of you can definitely find a cheaper way to do it. And to be honest, I think the way that the stand looked at the end, if we sort of just bought something or some foam printed board or some canvas vinyl, I don't think it would have looked actually as good as how it actually came out. So I'm very sort of proud, and I can tell myself it's like, I did that. I contributed to that.
Yeah, you did. It was a great story. It's I couldn't have done it without you, Yohann, and Kaya as well, who joined. Like everything, I wouldn't have gone to that show if you were not in the team at that point, knowing that I could have that support with you. And again, that's what I'm talking about, where the things we do with 424 come when we can meet a requirement with somebody who can support it. And it came at that time, otherwise we wouldn't have gone. By the way, I want to say, Gaurang, you're on the same, we keep talking about engineers contributing, but you are contributing by doing this podcast, for example. That wouldn't exist if you were not here, Gaurang.
Absolutely. Yes.
It came about because you were the right person to host it, and I think it's a great addition to the team. So that's how we roll, and I think the show was a great experience for us. And I was thinking about this today again, because obviously I'm trying to raise investment to build a car, and it's interesting how everything costs so much money, because there are so many layers of people to. If you want to reach the person you want to talk to, you have 3 or 4 layers, and that's what you pay fees for. And it's the same when you try and prepare for a show. If you really go by the price list of everything that they just give to normal companies, you're actually paying for a lot of overheads. You're not just paying for the product you're looking for. So at the stage we're at with PERRINN, we have to really cut the overheads. We have to really dig deeper and say, look, no, we can't pay the price list and things that you're asking for here. It's not the stage we're at. We're happy to pay for something, but it needs to be the price of what that thing costs, not the overheads on top of it. So it's a lesson for everyone. I think I've learned that from a young age, and I like operating this way.
Great. It was a great story. Good to hear the experience. I had no idea at all about this. So good to know.
A couple of years ago, yeah.
Good to know. I hope the audience also can understand what's going on at the PERRINN 424, and how we are trying to build with small steps, and the reward and the output is always huge, and that's what makes it amazing, right? So Yohann, what is your current pursuit of excellence at PERRINN 424? What are you currently working on with the team, and what's at stake for the future with PERRINN 424?
So, sort of in the past time, right now, I've sort of actually been working on renders, of all things. Again, a skill I never actually really had at the start, but learning, using Onshape, and sort of modifying the model, adding the logos, and producing those sort of high quality renders that we ended up using for, the marketing, and updating them as sort of the car updates is is sort of the ongoing project right now, and balancing that with I also have a full-time job, so it is to me it's not necessarily sort of sacrificing my time. It's sort of a nice break and enjoyment, something creative, and for a couple hours on a weekend, you can produce some beautiful renders. It's not like I'm using it now for my desktop. It's just sitting there and I get to look at it every single time I turn on my computer. But it's another thing, contributing. I've learned something entirely new. Similar to the story above. I may never use it again, but I've done it a couple of times and I sort of understand how it works, and learned quite a lot about rendering, colors, and using the PTC Onshape software.
Great, great. So yeah, as you mentioned, you're now working on a full-time in robotics and still contributing to PERRINN 424 with renders for now. So looking back, what advice would you give to other young engineers just trying to just find their feet, and how do they adapt to 2025? AI is out there, and how do we use the tool? How do we on top of ourselves, basically, just for an engineer, because you are an accomplished engineer right now.
So for me, it sort of, I know that a lot of people sort of go through the same struggles, and in a sense, a lot of people will sell you a very perfect path from school to university to getting your first job. But things like internships, grad schemes are all very much a great place to go. But sometimes they just don't end up happening. And sometimes it's not, entirely your fault. And for me, personal projects and that curiosity and that ambition and that drive sort of lifted me up. And I think that was how I was able to sell myself, and, even to Nico, how I was able to sell myself right at the start that I'm willing to do it. I'm ambitious, I'm dedicated. Yeah. And, although I got rejected a lot for, ironically, not having the experience, but from my point of view, I was getting all the experience, doing all the stuff I've done in CAD, learning the software, doing Python, all the stuff I've done now for PERRINN. Although it's not a formal job per se, I still treated it like one. And to me, it gave me that opportunity to have that professional experience that employers were sort of looking for. And, in my view, that's sort of how you build your profile. And it sort of proves to you that this is what a person can do, just compared to sort of getting your degree and passing or getting the grade at the end.
Of course.
And, in the end, for me, it was just starting by attending a meeting, and sort of over time, I ended up leading some pretty cool parts of the project, from engineering to, as you said earlier, even doing the logistics of just planning and organizing event, or talking to suppliers, or literally coming up with a creative way to stick black vinyl wrap to a foam board in the middle of the NEC in Birmingham, in the middle of January. But sometimes, it just takes to showing that you're reliable and just genuinely interested. And for me, it got me to where I am now.
Really inspiring. So, Nico, just any final thoughts on how the young engineers out there should be on top of the game, and how to be adaptive?
Listen, I think Johann's story is a great example of being, of how passion and dedication can lead you to where you want to go. And I think young engineers have to remember that to go where you want to go requires patience, hard work, and it doesn't come overnight, but it will happen. Everything will happen as long as you leave it enough time and keep working at it. And I say that because I remind myself every day that very thing. I'm not a young engineer anymore, but 424 is where I want to go in the real world with the car being built. And I remind myself every day that as long as I keep working on it, and I keep being honest with myself and with the people who work on the project with me, and just doing my best and keep developing, then it will happen, no doubt. And it was the same when I was out of university wanting to work in motorsport, and it didn't happen for a few months, as I said, because of the economic
Yeah.
climate and circumstances, and just not having the right opportunity at the right time at start. You just have to keep going and at it, and then it comes, and then you look back and think, what was a year in my life, you know?
Yes.
It was the right thing to stick with it, and then I got the job I wanted. Actually, F1 took me 4 or 5 years to get, even though I thought I was going to do it straight away. So, you know, but looking back, I was early. It was not a problem to wait. So so be patient, and if you know what you want to do in life, just stick with it. Uh, if you have a really good idea, just stick with it, and it will come for sure. Yeah.
I
I
definitely
think,
do remember that quote that you just said before once in a meeting is like, what's a year in your life? It's, it took me, I think, about 1.5, sort of 2 years to
Yeah.
find that first job. Just, at that time again, COVID just happened and a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
opportunities were sort of taken out under my feet. And,
Yeah.
I'm not sure where I would have been if I didn't have something to prove myself that was just beyond getting that sort of professional experience. And,
Or just follow your heart. Yeah.
Cool.
And I would say thanks to LinkedIn for recommending me that video out of the blue.
LinkedIn is
So-
is the place to be for everyone.
Yeah. For any professional opportunities, and yeah, amazing. And I think, like, obviously that also has been the name of the game for me as well. Coming from a country where there's not much scope of motorsports maybe a decade ago, right now it's booming, but I'm here, and the struggle is real. But here we are. I'm at Parent 424, just contributing to this amazing project. And I'm sure the people who are just watching this video right now will appreciate what is going on if you visit theparent.com and yeah, have a look. It's all out there. So great. Yes. Thank you so much, you both, for sharing your stories, your insights. And Yohann, it's been inspiring to hear your journey. Nico, as always, just thank you for your vision and leadership.
Thank you. Great podcast.
So
Thanks a lot.
that's
Thanks, Yohann,
so
for
that's it for today's
participating.
episode. Yes, of the Parent 44 podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, just don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out our previous episodes. And for this episode, we keep building big is the name of the game. And as always, keep pushing and racing towards the future. So until next time, ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you.